So we're still sticking with the state of Nigeria's economy. Of course, we're just about 2 weeks into the midterm report of President Buhari's administration, and one document that's been released by the administration, which is Nigeria's first medium-term economic outlook, 4 years as it were. 2017-2020 is the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan. So let's delve into that a little bit with Olufemi Awuyemi, who is a financial analyst and, of course, the Chief Executive Officer at ProShare Nigeria. Good morning. Good morning. Thanks for coming through. We've been through the ERGP a couple of times, but I'm sure this is one document we can't exhaust in a single conversation. So, a few questions for the Honorable Minister of Finance, so I'm sure you're listening on the sidelines there. Based on everything she says, what's your take?
Well, I think she alluded to the fact that Nigeria experienced the perfect storm, which apparently started in 2014, unlike what your last commentator said, and the fact that it was just a bumble to get around it and then get to us to this state. However, there are some few gaps within the statements that needs to be clarified. One is the fact that the government today has taken some steps to deal with some of the financial challenges in terms of the fiscal issues, creating some fiscal balance in there. But then it still has a huge amount of issues to deal with. But for me, there's one thing that stood out for me. You can achieve progress by coincidence, or you can actually do so by plan. If we assume that this is the plan we want to work with, the first thing that comes out to you is that there is nothing fundamentally different from this plan, from the needs, the leads by the state, the Vision 2010, the Vision 2020, 2020. They've always spoken about growth, investing in people, and most importantly, building a competitive economy. But it seems, therefore, that in terms of plan, the 2017 to 2020 ERGP plan would therefore represent the overarching plan, which subsumes the MTF and the FSP.
What exactly was the MTF supposed to achieve or to deliver?
Well, the MTF followed the natural progress of where we create an expenditure framework. The significant thing they did in this administration was to look at the imbalance between the infrastructure gap and as such exchange rate and interest rate. It became a lot more difficult thing to do. In fact, it was also not politically expedient for the government to do. So for any economist or any financial analyst, it was clear that we were not going to adjust that. So we were left with a back-ended adjustment approach. The back-ended adjustment approach would then say that having instituted some plans and some initiatives, which the MTF actually created what I call a contextual framework for, we will then be able to move as we get out of recession. But that leads to two major important questions. One, the ERGP as we have it did not address what I call the escape velocity plan. What is the escape velocity plan? The escape velocity plan talks about, you are not going to talk about growth out of recession alone, but growth on a sustainable basis thereafter. So that means that you would also have to consider the sterile effect of all your plans on the economy. And what do you mean by the sterile effects? Now, so you may get out of recession, you may have inflation coming down month on month, but then the sterile effect remains, i.e. unemployment, labor productivity, and the most important one, purchasing parity.
All these aren't built into the ERGP?
Well, unfortunately not.
Short-term macroeconomic stability, growth, yes, that is taken as given. Yes,
well, I don't understand what you mean by growth. Now, here's a very simple analogy that will help you. If I'm faced with the kind of recession Nigeria is faced with, and I have a challenge as to whether I want to send my children to school, to the school they're going now, or to bring them to a school in which my income can actually afford, I have three options in front of me. One, I would have to have a conversation with the family and the child to help them navigate that process, which is the conversation that we're having and the public debate and dialogue. The second would be, I have to be sure that the decision I'm taking is that, am I taking this child out of school for just this 1 year or for 2 years? Now, those also bring about two other issues. Now, if after 2 years I can't get it, that means the trajectory of my family is already slowed down in there. Then the plan, however, I have, which is the third one, is to say that if it's just a short-term initiative. Are there assets I have that I need to adjust, that I can use to leverage to raise money, because I'm sure that I'm going to be able to pay in 2-3 years time later on, so I don't have to necessarily take the child out of school. But if I do not have, then that means I'm going to have to reevaluate my expenses. Like I told you, we could not do the front loading. That means there's no austerity, because what you then do with that approach, when you do not know what's going to happen with the child, is that everything in the family contrasts.
Yes. So that means we need to do something with diversification. And we've talked about this, we've turned it around the table, we've played it all around for quite some time. Do you think the ERGP can deliver on that? Well,
you see, look, like all plans, the ERGP, like all economic plans, the ERGP is a very good work of fiction. What is a singular point around a good work of fiction is the effective tripod upon which it stands, right? The subplots, the stories. So you probably need 3 things. 1, you need the policy, outright fiscal policy that can be aligned with your monetary policy. You need programs, and then you need projects. That means, as it is, the ERGP must have a rollout plan. That means we must be able to cost the ERGP. You obviously are aware of what is happening concerning Saudi Arabia. And then when they had their whole plan, they detailed and broke those whole thing down. I think that's not a challenge with the Ministry of Finance. It is something I'm aware that the Ministry of Budget and Planning is actually working on, to say that we must be able to cost the ERGP for the next few sessions. So that it's not like a current administration plan, it's a Nigerian plan. And as such, we must be able to then say, here are the policies. And one of the challenges we've always had is that balance between the fiscal policy or the monetary policy. But so that we do not turn into semantics, what really are we talking about? The ERGP is more monetarist in outlook. It talks about GDP as a measure of growth. We are then moving into the area where we are talking about qualitative growth as against quantitative growth. Now, the GDP will provide you the quantitative growth. The qualitative growth will come from the GNI. Now,
yes. Again, that speaks to the budget on one side, whether it is in real value or just paper value.
No, in terms of, see, the ERGP talks about the ascension in money supply to about, say, maybe 45 trillion naira.
Yes.
By 2020.
Yes.
But then it puts inflation at about a single digit. No, you can't grow money supply by about 100% and expect your inflation to stay at a single digit, and it doesn't talk about interest rate. So the harmonization of your fiscal expectations must be steeped in your money supply considerations.
Do you think if we have the details of the ERGP from the Planning and Budget Ministry, Udo Doma, we should have a bit of more clarity on some of these